They stole my dead husband's fortune and handed it to a woman who'd been in our family for exactly 6 months. What they didn't know, while they were stealing my $2.3 million inheritance, I was sitting on their $47 million company. Let me tell you how I destroyed them with a single phone call. 3 days after burying my husband David, I sat in that lawyer's office watching them celebrate. My father-in-law Robert wore his victory smile. My brother-in-law Marcus couldn't look me in the eye. And Crystal, the blonde bombshell who'd somehow wormed her way into our family, examined her manicured nails like she was bored. David Miller leaves his entire estate to Crystal Marie Miller, the attorney announced. Every penny. The house we'd shared for 8 years. Our savings. Even David's grandmother's jewelry. Gone. To her. Robert leaned forward with that cold smile I'd learned to hate. No mistake, Sarah. David wanted the family money to stay in the family. Real family. Crystal finally looked up, her voice dripping fake sweetness. Don't worry, Sarah. I'll take good care of everything David loved. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip that conference table and watch their smug faces crumble. Instead, I smiled back. Because 24 hours later, I was going to own everything they'd worked 3 generations to build. Crystal examined her manicured nails. She didn't even look surprised. Marcus wouldn't meet my eyes. Sarah, you have to understand. You and David never had kids. The money should stay with blood relatives. Blood relatives. My voice cracked. I was married to your brother for 8 years. But you're not a Miller, Robert said firmly. Crystal is. She's carrying on the family name. I stared at them in disbelief. David and I had struggled with infertility for years. The treatments, the disappointments, the nights we held each other and cried. And now they were using that pain against me. This can't be legal, I said to the attorney. Hayes shuffled papers uncomfortably. The will is properly executed and witnessed. Mrs. Miller, I mean the deceased's widow, can contest it, but what? The estate has already begun transferring assets to Mrs. Crystal Miller, as per the deceased's specific instructions. My heart sank. David had planned this. My own husband had planned to leave me with nothing. Robert stood up, straightening his expensive suit. Sarah, you're a smart girl. You'll land on your feet. Maybe it's time to move on anyway. Start fresh somewhere else. Somewhere else, I repeated numbly. Well, the house was David's before you married. Technically, it belongs to Crystal now. We'll give you 60 days to find somewhere new. They were kicking me out of my own home. The home where David and I had planned to raise children. Where we'd painted nurseries that stayed empty. Where I'd held his hand as cancer took him away piece by piece. Crystal finally spoke up, her voice sickeningly sweet. Don't worry, Sarah. I'll take good care of everything. David would want his things in loving hands. I stumbled out of that office in a daze. Everything I'd built with David, gone. Given to a woman who barely knew him. But as I sat in my car, something clicked in my mind. A memory from 2 years ago. David had been acting strange about his investments. Secretive phone calls. Late nights at the computer. When I asked, he'd just smile and say he was diversifying. I'd assumed he meant stocks or bonds. But now I remembered something else. A business card I'd found in his jacket pocket. Phoenix Holdings, LLC. That night, I dug through David's home office. Crystal would own this space soon, but for now, it was still mine. In a locked drawer I'd never bothered to open, I found financial documents. Phoenix Holdings, LLC wasn't just an investment. David had purchased a majority stake in a company. 65% ownership to be exact, and the company he'd bought, Miller Construction and Development. Robert Miller's company. the family business that had made the Millers wealthy for 3 generations. My hands shook as I read through the paperwork. David had been quietly buying shares for months before his diagnosis. He'd used shell companies and third-party transactions to hide his identity. By the time Robert realized what was happening, it was too late. David owned his father's company, and now I did. The irony was perfect. Robert had just stolen my inheritance, not knowing I'd inherited something far more valuable. I owned 65% of everything he'd worked for. But why hadn't David told me? Why the secrecy? I found my answer in a sealed envelope marked, "For Sarah, open only if something happens to me." My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you've discovered my little secret. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you while I was alive, but I needed to protect you. Dad has never accepted you as family. I've heard him on the phone with his attorney talking about ways to minimize your inheritance. He thinks you married me for money. He's wrong, but he'll never see that. So I bought his company, every share I could get my hands on. Phoenix Holdings is yours now, the will that gives Crystal my personal estate. That was Dad's idea. He thought he was being clever, keeping family money from you. He doesn't know that you now own the source of all that family money. The company is worth $47 million, much more than the estate he stole from you. Use this power wisely, my love. You have a choice to make. You can destroy them, or you can show them what real family means. I trust you to make the right decision. All my love, David. I sat in David's chair holding his letter and cried. Not from sadness this time, from something else entirely. The next morning, I called Phoenix Holdings' attorney, a woman named Janet Chen, who'd been managing David's affairs. We met at her office downtown. "Mrs. Miller, I've been waiting for your call," Janet said. "David left very specific instructions about how to proceed once you discovered the truth." "What kind of instructions?" Janet smiled. "He predicted exactly what his family would do. The timing, the will, even the 60-day eviction notice. He wrote a plan for every scenario." She handed me a thick folder. "David's revenge playbook," he called it. Though I think justice might be a better word, I opened the folder. Inside were detailed financial reports on Miller Construction. The company was profitable but heavily leveraged. Robert had been taking massive loans against future projects, gambling on a boom in luxury developments. "The company is one bad quarter away from serious trouble," Janet explained. David knew this. He also knew his father would never ask family for help. Too much pride. "So what do I do?" "You have several options." David outlined them all. Option 1. Sell my shares back to Robert at market value. Walk away with $30 million and start fresh somewhere else. Option 2. Call in the company's debts and force bankruptcy. Destroy 3 generations of Miller legacy out of spite. Option 3. The most complex plan. Keep my ownership secret while slowly improving the company's finances. Then reveal the truth at the perfect moment, when they needed me most. David called option 3 the long game, Janet said. He thought you'd choose it. Said you were too good a person to destroy innocent people, but too smart to let his family walk all over you. David knew me well. I chose option 3. For 6 months, I played the part of the grieving widow who'd lost everything. I moved into a modest apartment across town. I took a job at a marketing firm making just enough to get by. To everyone watching, Sarah Miller had been broken by her husband's betrayal. Meanwhile, Phoenix Holdings quietly began making strategic moves. When Miller Construction's biggest client threatened to cancel a $12 million project due to delays, Phoenix Holdings, coincidentally, invested in the client's company, smoothing over the relationship. When a supplier demanded immediate payment for materials threatening to shut down 3 job sites, Phoenix Holdings purchased the supplier's debt and extended payment terms. When Robert couldn't secure financing for a luxury hotel project, Phoenix Holdings arranged funding through a subsidiary company. Every crisis that should have destroyed Miller Construction got mysteriously resolved. Robert thought he was having the luckiest year of his business career. Crystal, meanwhile, was living it up. She'd redecorated David's house, completely erasing every trace of our life together. She bought a new BMW. She threw parties where she showed off her inheritance to friends. Marcus seemed uncomfortable with it all, but he never said anything. Weak men rarely do. The perfect moment came at the company's annual shareholders' meeting. Robert had called it early planning to celebrate their miraculous turnaround year and announce expansion plans. The meeting was held at the downtown Marriott. Robert had spared no expense. Catered lunch, open bar, the works. He'd invited the entire extended family, major clients, and the company's key investors. I arrived wearing a simple black dress and sat in the back row. Nobody paid attention to the poor widow who'd lost everything. Robert gave his presentation with typical arrogance. Miller Construction has not only survived the challenges of this year, we've thrived. Our profits are up 34%. Our debt is down 60%, and we're positioned for unprecedented growth. The audience applauded. Crystal beamed from the front row, wearing a dress that probably cost more than my rent. This success proves that Miller Construction is built on solid family values. Robert continued. We take care of our own. We make hard decisions. We keep our legacy strong. More applause. I noticed several people glancing at me with pity. The woman who wasn't really family. The outsider who'd been cast out. Robert raised his champagne glass. So let's toast to family, to loyalty, and to keeping Miller Construction in Miller hands. That's when I stood up. Actually, Mr. Miller, I think there's something you should know about those Miller hands. The room went quiet. All eyes turned to me. Robert's face went red. Sarah, what are you doing here? This is a private company meeting, for investors only. I walked to the front of the room, my heels clicking on the marble floor. Janet Chen appeared from a side door carrying a briefcase. You're right, Mr. Miller. This meeting is for investors only. I accepted a microphone from Janet. That's exactly why I'm here. I don't understand, Robert said, but his voice had lost its confidence. Let me introduce myself properly, I said to the room. My name is Sarah Miller. I'm David Miller's widow. And as of 8 months ago, I'm the majority owner of Miller Construction and Development. The silence was deafening. Janet stepped forward with a stack of legal documents. Mrs. Miller owns 65% of this company through Phoenix Holdings, LLC. Every mysterious investor who's helped you this year, every convenient solution to your financial problems, that was Mrs. Miller protecting her investment. Robert's face went from red to white. That's impossible. I would have known. The shareholders. Your son David was very clever about hiding his purchases, I said. Shell companies, third-party transactions, overseas holding firms, all perfectly legal, all properly documented. I looked directly at Crystal, who had gone pale. Did you enjoy spending my husband's inheritance, Crystal? Because while you were redecorating our house with my money, I was saving your new family's business with my real inheritance. Marcus stood up shakily. Sarah, we didn't know. Of course you didn't know. David made sure of that. He knew exactly what kind of people his family really were. He saw how you'd treat me after he was gone. So he gave me the power to treat you the same way. Robert found his voice again, though it came out as a croak. What do you want? This was the moment I'd been planning for months. The moment David had prepared me for. I want several things, Mr. Miller. First, I want Crystal to return every penny of David's inheritance. The house, the savings, the investments, all of it. But the will? Crystal started. The will was written under duress and based on fraudulent information. Janet interrupted. We have evidence that David was coerced into changing his estate plan. A court will overturn it easily. Second, I continued, I want a formal apology, to me and to David's memory. You stole from a grieving widow and then mocked her for losing everything. Robert's hands were shaking now. And if we refuse, I smiled. The same cold smile he'd given me in the attorney's office. Then I exercise my rights as majority owner. I can vote to remove you as CEO. I can dissolve the board of directors. I can restructure the company completely. I paused. Or I can simply sell my shares to your biggest competitor. I'm sure they'd love to acquire Miller Construction's client list and contracts. The room buzzed with whispered conversations. Robert's empire was crumbling in real time. You're bluffing, he said weakly. I nodded to Janet, who handed me a folder. I've already received 2 offers. Davidson Construction bid $52 million for my shares. Henderson Development offered $48 million. I held up the documents. Both offers expire at midnight tonight. That wasn't a bluff. I'd spent weeks preparing for this moment. Robert sank into a chair. 3 generations of family business destroyed by his own greed and pride. But then I surprised everyone, including myself. However, I said there is a third option. The room leaned forward. David's letter told me I had a choice. Destroy you or show you what real family means. I walked closer to Robert. Despite everything you've done to me, I choose family. I handed Janet a different set of documents. I'm transferring 30% of my shares to a family trust. Robert, you'll remain as CEO, but with oversight from a board that includes outside directors. Marcus, you'll become COO and learn to run this business properly. Crystal looked up hopefully. Crystal will return David's inheritance immediately. All of it. But she can stay in the family if she chooses to earn her place honestly. I turned to address the entire room. This company will continue as Miller Construction. But it will be run with integrity, fairness, and real family values. The kind David believed in. Robert was crying now, actual tears running down his weathered face. I keep 35% ownership. I continued. Enough to maintain control, but not enough to rule like a tyrant. The family trust gets 30%. The remaining 35% stays with Robert and Marcus, as long as they meet performance standards set by the new board. Janet handed out copies of the new corporate structure. Why? Robert whispered. After everything we did to you, why would you save us? I thought about David's letter, about the choice he'd left me, because someone needs to show you what love actually looks like. I said, David loved you even though you never accepted me. He could have destroyed you while he was alive, but he chose to protect the family business instead. Even from his own family. I walked toward the exit, then turned back one more time. The house needs to be returned to me within 30 days. Crystal, you can find somewhere else to live. The savings account, investments, and personal property will be returned immediately. I looked directly at Robert. And I want that apology. In writing. Published in the business section of the newspaper. Sarah, wait! Marcus called out. I stopped. I'm sorry, we were wrong, all of us. I nodded. I know you are. That's why you get to keep your jobs. 6 months later, Miller Construction was more profitable than ever. Robert had become a different person. Humbler, more appreciative. He'd even started including me in family dinners again. Crystal had moved out of David's house and gotten a job. Real work seemed to agree with her. She and Marcus were seeing a marriage counselor. Marcus himself had thrown himself into learning the business. For the first time in his life, he was proving he could be more than just Robert's son. The house felt like home again. I'd kept most of Crystal's changes. They were actually improvements. But I'd restored David's office exactly as he'd left it. Sometimes I sat in his chair and read his letter again. The part about showing them what real family means, I think I'd made the right choice. Not because they deserved forgiveness, but because David had been right about something else too. I was too good a person to destroy innocent people. The company had employees, contractors, suppliers, families depending on Miller Construction to survive. But I was also too smart to let anyone walk all over me ever again. The new corporate structure ensured that. I had enough power to protect myself, and enough oversight to keep the Millers honest. It was a balance David would have approved of. On the anniversary of David's death, I found Robert sitting in my backyard. He'd been helping me plant a memorial garden. "I never said thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For being the daughter I never deserved. For showing us who we really were and then helping us become better." I handed him a bottle of water. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset over David's garden. "He knew, didn't he?" Robert asked. David knew exactly how this would play out. I smiled. David knew us all better than we knew ourselves. "Do you think he'd be proud of how we handled everything?" I considered the question. David had left me a choice, and I'd chosen forgiveness over revenge. But I'd also chosen strength over victimhood. I think David would be proud that his family finally learned what family actually means. Robert nodded. "What about you, Sarah? Are you happy?" I looked around the yard, where David and I had dreamed of watching children play. The space was different now. A garden instead of a playground. But it was still beautiful. Still full of love. "I'm at peace," I said. "That's more than I expected to find." And it was true. I'd lost David, but I'd found something else. I'd found my own strength. I'd found a family that finally accepted me. And I'd found a way to honor David's memory while building my own future. The revenge had been perfect, but the forgiveness had been even better. Sometimes the best way to win is to help everyone else win too, even when they don't deserve it. Especially then,